Hey, welcome! My name is Esteban, and for today's video, we're going to be building an application that can tell you how fast you're typing. We're going to use React for this application, so let me just show you how it works. So this is the app. We have a counter that's set to a minute, we have a start button, we have an input. We can't type anything yet, we need to click here, start. As we type, we have some indicators that we are hitting the right things. If we hit anything wrong, we can see the feedback and we can just correct our mistakes. I am pretty slow, so I shouldn't have like an amazing result. Once the counter finished, we have our score. I just hit it 35 words per minute, which is really low. And we also have this score that says how many of the words we hit it and a percentage. So I have 97%. That's basically the app. It's like a really nice pet project. So let's now go to the code. Okay guys, so now we're going to jump into the terminal. For this, make sure that you have Node installed in your system. You can check if you have Node by typing node-b and it will tell you which version of Node you have. If you don't have Node, please install it. Now we're going to create a new React project. For that, we're going to use the CLI that we have with npx create react amp, and we're going to give it a name. For me, it's going to be typing test. This is going to create a new React application for you. It might take a while, so I will come back soon. Alright, because I have Yarn in my system, it installed everything with Yarn. If you don't have Yarn, it might have installed everything using npm. Now we are going to open VS Code or any editor that you want. I recommend you to use VS Code. You can use this CLI to open directly this folder, but you can also just open that folder, the folder that we just created. In my case, it's typing test, and you can just open that with VS Code. Alright, now we are in VS Code and we can see what we have in here. We have an index.html that has the root of our project. Everything was created by the template. We can now open here the terminal if you want to, or you can use the other terminal. And if you have npm, you will need to run npm run start. Because I don't have npm, I have yarn, I have to do it like this: yarn run start. This is going to start a new development server for the application, and we can see directly the application every time we make a change. Here's the application. It's just the default template. We can actually test if this is working by changing anything here in the app.js file. We can type learn react now, and if we save, we can see that change. We are not going to use anything of this, so I'm just going to remove everything, and I can just leave that div right there. I'm not also going to use this file, so I can just delete the file. In index.js, we're not going to also use this CSS, so I can also first remove the line and then I can delete the file. I can also remove this logo and this test file. So now we have a blank canvas. We're going to use Bulma CSS for the styles. Bulma CSS is a really cool framework. It's really cool because it only has CSS. It doesn't have any JavaScript like Bootstrap. So that's what we're going to use. For this CSS, we can just add the CLI. So if we go here, we can see that we have a CDN that we can add into our public index.html file. So here we can add those styles, and if we refresh, we should now have those styles. Now let's start with the app. So we first are going to declare some constants. So the first constant is going to be the number of words, so num of words, and this is going to be a number, so how many words we are going to display to the user. So we're going to pick 200. I don't know if anyone can type fast more than 200 words per minute, but that's going to be our limit. And we also are going to have a variable for the seconds. So how many seconds we're going to have the countdown. And this is going to be 60 seconds. Okay, so now we can start by importing from React. We are going to import the use state hook. So this hook will allow us to keep the state of this component of our application. And the first thing that we are going to have is an array of words. So these are all the words that the user can start typing. So we are going to have that, and we can use the state, and the initial value is going to be an empty array. Then once we mount the component, we're going to use the use effect hook, and now we can, every time we have a new document, when the component mount, we're going to set those words. For creating this, having these words, we're going to use a library that's called random words. So let me first stop the server, the development server, then I'm going to install that library. So if you're using npm, you should do something like npm I and then the library, but for me it's yarn add, and the library is called random words. So this is a library that has a bunch of words that we can use. It's going to take a bit. Alright, so we have that, and don't forget to have your development server again. Start your development server. And now we can use our hook, use effect hook. This effect hook receives a callback, and as a second parameter, a dependency list. Because this will run when we mount the component, the dependency list is going to be empty for now. And here we are going to set our words. So for this, we are going to have a function that's going to be called generate words, and this will return a new array. We're using the array constructor, and it takes the array length. So the length of the array is going to be our constant for the numbers, num of words, and we can now fill that array. So we can't add directly the random values because it needs to execute a function. So we're going to fill everything for now with null, and then we're going to map into this array. And here we have every item, and now we can use the library that we just installed. So we first needs to import random words from random words, and this is just a method that we can invoke that will generate a random word. So we just need to invoke that method. So we have our function, and now we are going to invoke that function inside here, so it can populate our words array. Alright, and now maybe we can just display those words as JSON to see if it's working. So we can do something like this. If we save, we should be able to see a bunch of words. So we have all of our words here. So those words look really ugly now, so let's fix that. For that, we're going to have a div with a div that's going to have the class name of section. So this is a class from Bulma CSS that we can use, and then we are going to have a card. So So I want to use Emmet for VS Code for React. So if you also want to do that, you can open the settings. I'm going to add that setting to the workspace. Here I can type Emmet. So here we have a list of languages that we can have. So here I'm going to have, for JavaScript, I also want JavaScript React. And now I can just create my classes like this. I can just type that card tab and this will add the class directly. So I have the card, then I will have the card content, then I will have a content div, and here we are going to map through that array. So for all the words we're going to map, and we have a word, and we also have an index for that. Here we're going to return a JSX, so we need to return JSX. That's going to be an spam tag, and this is going to have the word, and we need to use curly braces to display every word. So if we save that and we go, so if we save that and go back here, we can see that we have the card, but everything still looks ugly. That's why we need to have a space. So I can just, here I can just add a blank space there. So now we should have, well, I can have another span. Here I'm going to use a React fragment. So it's just a component, atomic component, because we need to have like a parent component that can that can grab everything. And here I'm going to have an empty span like this. So now we have a space for every word, which looks way better. Okay, so we have all of the words. So let's continue with the app. Now that we have all the words, we also need an input. So this is also going to have the class section, and inside here we're going to have the class is size 1. Well, this is not for the, so for the input we're going to have the class control. Also the class is expanded, and also the class section. So this is going to be the wrapper for the input, and here I can have an input with the class of input like this. Let's go back and see if we have our input. So we have our input here. So we have the input. Now we need the button to start, and for that we're going to have another section, and here we have a button with the class of button, and also the class of is info, and also the class of is full width. So we have the button, and we can say something like start. Let's go back to see if we have the button. So we have the button right here. Alright, so the only thing that's missing for our interface is the countdown. So right here we're going to have another section, and here we're going to have another div that has the class of is size 1. So this is another Bulma class that will make our text bigger. Then we also have a class for has text, center. So this is going to center of our text, and also a class that says has text primary. And here we're going to have an h2 that has our count. Now is hard coded to 60. So here we have our count. So we have all of the elements of the UI, but now we need to add the logic. So let me start with the countdown. So if we click in the button, we should start the countdown. So for that, I'm going to declare a new state. And for the countdown, it's going to start from the 60 seconds. So we are just going to pass that here, and we can say countdown set countdown. So we have the state. Now we can pass that state here, set count, and not the function, just the state, set countdown. And here in the button we're going to add an on click event, and here we're going to have a function that's going to say start. We don't have this function yet, so let me create the function start. So what's going to do this? What's going to be doing this function? So for this we're going to use a interval from JavaScript. So we can say set interval. So this interval will have a callback that's what's going to be doing every time you have that interval. And as a second parameter, we're going to have the range of the interval. So for and this is in milliseconds. So we have this to run every second. And for representing a second, we just can type 1000 milliseconds. So what we are going to do in the interval is pretty simple. We're just going to set the countdown, and the value is going to be the countdown -1. So that's what's going to happen every second. So let's test that, and if we click here, it started, but it only worked once. And well, the reason for that is that because we have this in like a closure in JavaScript, this is not aware of our current state. So it's like living his own context. So for make it work, we might need to do something like, so we can actually, for these setters from JavaScript, for this from React, for these setters, we can have like a callback, and the callback is going to have like a parameter. It's going to have the previous countdown, so the previous state, previous countdown. And now that we can read to this previous countdown inside here, we can now just return previous countdown -1. And if we save now, we should be able, well, I will refresh because that got freeze there. So if I click now, it should just work. So now it's working as it should. But of course we have a problem here. And the problem is that it's going to keep doing that infinitely. So let me show you. So if we stop, well, if we refresh this, and let me change this to 10 seconds. If I go back here and I start, we can see that now it should go into the negatives numbers. You can see that we have negative numbers. So for fixing that, we're going to first start this interval in a variable right here, interval, and right here we are going to have, instead of just returning the current value, the new value, we're going to have some logic. So return, we can just paste what we have previously, but we are going to have some logics here. So if the previous countdown equals 0, so if this value is 0, we're going to stop the interval. So for that we can use clear interval, and this is just a JavaScript function that we have access, and here we have to pass the interval, so it's going to be this one, the one that we stored in a variable. And if that's not the case, we are going to have an else condition, and this else condition is the one that's going to subtract and update the countdown. So if we save that and we go back here, so now it should stop at 0. So 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So it stopped. Alright. So we have the countdown. So now we need to type into the input. So for that we are going to have like a listener for each key that we have here, each key press. So if we go back to the code right here, we're going to split every word into characters. So we're mapping for every word, but now we are going to map every word into, and here we're going to add a key. That this is important. So a key is a identifier that requires to keeping track of what needs to be updated. So the key is going to be equal to the index, and right here we are going to again map into every character of that word. So for that we're going to have like this function called split. So this is for strings. So it's complaining because I don't have that inside there. So we're going to split, and we need to add a separator. So it's going to be an empty string. So this is going to take our word, and it's going to slice every character of that word into individual letters, and for that we're going to map that into a character, and here we're going to have an IDX, and we again are going to return JSX. It's also going to be an span element, span, and here we are going to have every individual character, and this also needs to have a key. So the key is going to equal the IDX that we just had. So here we have every word, and remember that we need to have like a space, so we are going to add our fragment here, and we're going to have our blank space right here. So now if we save, if we go back here, we should have the same, but now every character is being rendered individually, so we can keep track of every single one. Okay, so now I can remove this. But now what I want to do is I want to have a listener that's going to be listening to every input right here into the input. So this input also is going to have a class of, okay, so here's where we are going to have the listener, and this is going to be called onKeyDown. So every time the user presses the key, we're going to have this event, and we're going to have a function that's going to be called handle key down. The function does not exist yet, but we are going to create it right now. So what's going function handle key down, and this is going to have an event. So here we can just console that log the event that key. And now if we open the terminal, we're going to fix this later. And now if we type, we can see that we're logging every key. Another thing that we need to do is we need to keep track of what's inside the input. So we are going to, let me fix now the thing that's complaining. So actually we need to have the key right here. I'm just going to add another span. And now it shouldn't complain. Yeah, it's not complaining about that. Okay, so what we need is to keep track of every input that we have into all the word that we have into the input. So for now, for that we are going to use, of course, a state. So we can have something like const, and this is going to be the current input, and here we can have set current input equals use state, and here we're going to have an empty array. So that's what we can keep track. And here we are going to have in our input, we're going to have the value. For the value, we're going to have the current input. And what we need to do now is we need to update that input every time we type. So for that, we are going to use a different event that's going to be the onChange event. And here we have a callback that has our event, and we're going to say set current input. And this is going to take that event, and that event has a target and has a value. So that's how we can update. Every time we type, we can update that input. So we now are keeping track of all of the word that we have in the input. So what we need to do now is we need to compare what we have inside the input with the current word. So for that, we're going to have this state that's called current word index, set current word index, and use state. The initial value is going to be 0, 0. So this is going to keep track of the current index of the word. It starts at 0, and now we can say something. So when we need to compare the word, so every time we hit the space bar, we need to check if the document matches if the word matches the input. So for that, we can just do something like this. So this event, we're going to deconstruct that event, and here we have something that's called a key code. So we're going to use a key code because it's much simpler to just, and space is not like a letter, so it's much simpler that we can just check for the key code. And if the key code equals 32, so that's the key code for an spacebar. So if that's been hit, we are going to check the match. So this function does not exist yet, so let me create that function. Function check match. So what this is going to do is we are going to have a variable called word to compare, and this is going to equals words, and from those words we're going to pick the one that's the current index, that is the current word. So we have current word, current word index. This is the variable that's going to keep track of the current word. So this is what we are going to compare. So now we can just say something like this, does it match? And this is going to be, we're just going to compare the word to compare, we're going to check if it's equals to the current input. So that's what is inside the input box. And because we have an space, we're going to trim that input. So if we use the trim method, it's going to remove every blank space. Because we just hit the space bar, we're going to have a blank space. So here we need to have 3 equal signs. And here we are going to just console.log. Console.log, does it match? So there's one thing that's missing here, is every time we hit the space bar, so let me add a comment, space bar, we need to update the index, so we need to move the pointer to the next word. So we can say set current word index is going to be the current word index plus 1. We're just going to increment the index by 1. So let me go back here, and now if I hit simple and I hit space, we can see that we are checking for the match, so it's true right now. If I hit space, we have false, and the reason for that is because we need to clear this input, right? So let me refresh that. So another thing that we need to do here is, after we check the match, we're going to set the current input. We're going to set that to an empty string again. So now if I hit space, it clears the input, and we can see that it does match. So we now need to are in the second word, so selection space, it matches, we have true. So now we have the word tied. So let's say I made a mistake, I typed this, so now it doesn't match. So now let's go to the fourth one, center, and it matches. So we now have a way to know if this matches or not. Okay, now that we have that, we are going to display the result to the user, and let me do that right now. So we're going, after this, we're going to have a section, another section, and here we're going to have 2 columns. So for that, I can use this Bulma class columns, and I'm going to have 2 columns. So I can just hit column start 2, and this is going to add 2 columns, and the value for that column is going to be, for the first column is going to, we're going to have a p tag that has the class name of is size 5, and this is going to say words per minute. And we're going to have a second p tag that's going to have the class of has text primary, and also it's going to have a is size 1. Oh, this is not a dash, it's a dot. So it's not has, it's has is size 1, and here we are going to have like the result. So let me for now hard code the result, like I don't know, 32 words per minute. And in this column we're going to have the accuracy, so we're going to have the class that says is size 5, and here we're going to have the accuracy. And next we're going to have a p tag that has the class name of has text info, and also is size 1, and here we're going to have the accuracy. So for now it's going to be 100% hard-coded. If we go back here, we have that, and well, for each column I want to center all the items. So here I'm going to add this class called hasText center. I can copy this right here, and now it is in the center. I can remove this quotation, and well, here we need to keep track of all of the words that are correct, right? So for that we can just use another state. So we can say use state, and the first value is going to be 0, and here we can say correct, set correct, and we're also going to keep track of all the incorrect words. So incorrect, set incorrect, and right here we can just, in the check match, we can just check if does it match. We're going to increment the correct number, so set correct to the correct plus 1, and otherwise we're going to set the incorrect number to incorrect plus 1. Now we can go back here, and here instead of hard coding this, we can add the correct count. So we have the correct count, and here we can say something like math.round, and we are going to divide the correct divided by correct plus incorrect. So all of the words that the user tried, we're going to, the ones that the user did correctly, and all of this is going to be multiplied by 100, and after that we are going to have the percentage. We're going to display this as percentage. So right now is we have none here because this is 0 divided by 0, but if we start and we type moon condition, oh, what I'm doing. So okay, smile past egg, we 3 perhaps. Yep. So right now you can see that we have 6 words. Well, it was just 10 seconds, but we have 6 words and an accuracy of 100%. So now we need to have like a game loop, because right now you can see that we can just keep typing and there's no way to reset, and we have an error here. So we needed a game loop, and for that we are going to have something like that says status set status use state. So the initial status is going to be called waiting. So that's going to, and we're going to just use strings for this. So the initial status is waiting, and here if we go to the input, we want to disable the input. So the input is going to be disabled if the status is different than starter. So only is the input is only going to be enabled when we start the game. All right. So now we're going to hide all of the words. So the condition for that is going to be if the status equals started. Only then we're going to we're going to use this for that works like an if statement. So if the status equals started, then we're going to display all of the words. So let me quickly check what's the closing tag, and I can just tap this right there. Yeah, so this is only going to be shown if the status equals started. Another thing is the part when we display the result. So this is going to only to be present if the status equals finished. So only if the status is finished, we are going to display the results. So if we go back here, we now only have the counter, and this is disabled, and we can trigger a start. So if we click start, we should change the state of the game. So let's do that now. Okay, so only if the current state is different from started, only if this is true, only then we are going to first set the status of started, and then we are going to do all of the things that we were doing before. So if this is the case where it is different for started, but if the status equals finished, we're going to reset the game to the initial, like an initial state. So we need first to set new words, generate words. We also need to reset the current word index to 0. We're also going to reset the correct count and the incorrect count to 0. Okay, the only thing that's missing for the game loop is that we need to set the status of finished, and that's going to happen. So that's going to happen when we here, if the countant equals 0, so here we are going to finish the game. So set status, and status is going to be finished. Another thing that we are missing here is, remember that this set countdown needs to return something. So remember that this set countdown needs to return something. So right now we are not returning anything when the countdown is equals 0. So we need to return, and what we are going to return is just the seconds. Also, another thing is that we are going to reset, right here we are going to reset the current input. So let me save that, and our game loop should be working. There's an error here. I'm using state. So where's that state? It shouldn't be state. This needs to be status, not state. Yeah. So now if I start. Oh, another thing that we are missing is, if you click start and you start typing, nothing happens, and what we want to do is to autofocus this input. So for that we are going to use another React hook called useRef. So this is really nice to create reference for DOM elements. So I can say const text input equals useRef, and we need to give it an initial value. It's going to be null, and here in the input right here we can say ref equals, and here we can say text input. So this is going to assign the reference to the hook that we just created. So now we can access this element, and when we are going to ask this element, we're going to use another useEffect hook, and this hook is going to have, as a dependency, it's going to have the status. So every time the status gets updated, we can execute this hook, and here we are going to check if the status equals started. So once we start the game, now we are going to grab that text input, and we are going to access the current property there, and here we can use the focus method. So this is going to focus that input. So we are using useEffect because that's if we try to do it here, it will not work because we are we don't have access to the latest state. So that's why we are using the useEffect hook. So let me go back here, and now if we type start, it should autofocus. So you can see that it worked. Forgotten 40 way tears started attention. Yep. So now it hide the words, and we have the results. So if I click start again, we should start a new game. Yeah, and we have different works. So I'm going to make a mistake here. Properly. I didn't have any word, so let me do it again. Famous refused right joined. And well, now we got all of the words. So the game loop is working, and the last thing that we need to do is to show a visual representation of every keystroke to the user, and for that we are going to use again indexes. So we're going to have an index that's going to be called const is going to be called current char index, and we're going to have a setter that's going to be set current char index. The initial value is not going to be 0, it's going to be minus 1, and the reason for that is because we don't, once we hit the key, then we're going to have the 0, so we're going to start with -1. And another thing that we want to have is we're going to keep track of the current character, so we're going to have a current char variable and a set current char variable, and the initial value is going to be an empty array. So when this is going to be updated, so this is going to be updated every time we type we have a key. So if the key code equals 32, we are going to have all of this, but we also going to set the current char index to the initial value, and the initial value is -1. So that's one case. Else, so for the other cases, we are going to set the current character index is going to be the current char index plus 1. We're going to increment the char index, and we are also going to set the current char. It's going to be, so what's going to be, we also have from the event, we have the key event, the key property. So this property represents what's the key that the user typed. So that's going to what we are going to keep track. So we now are keeping track of all of the characters and the indexes. So now we need to check if it matches and display different CSS properties if it matches with the current word. So now if we go back to our JSX, here we are going, we can have for each character, we're going to have like different class names. So let me just show you, for example, we can have like has background success. So this is going to paint everything with green. And we don't want that, but we only want to keep track of every single keystroke. So what we are going to do, we are going to have a function here that's going to be getChar class. And what this function is going to take as parameters is going to have the index of the word, the index of the character. So this index comes from the word, this index comes from the character, and we also want to have the current character, the value of the character. So we declare the function, but now we need to declare the function. So it's going to be called getChar class. So what we are going to read here is the word index, then the char index, and the character. So we can say if the word index equals the current word index, so that's what we are keeping track here, current word index, and also the current, and also if the char the index equals the current char index. So we are just checking if the word corresponds of the current thing that we are typing, and also if we do have a current char. So we are when we have a space bar, we don't have a current char. So only then we are going to check if the char equals current char. So this is the character that we are keeping track here, and this is the character that we have in the text. So if the char of the text matches the char of the one that the user typed, we are going to return our class that has background primary or success. So if that's true, we're going to return a green class. Otherwise, so if it doesn't match, we are going to return has background danger. And another check that we want to do here, is we want to check if the status of the game is different from finished. So if the game finished, we don't want to show anything, and that's the else clause here, So else, we are going to return an empty array. So if we go back to our application, start again, so team, so you can see it's working. Father chart. Isn't that great when it works at the first try? Yeah, so it's working. So now if we start again and we make a mistake, it shows different. So we have an issue here, is that we can't correct. If we made a mistake, we can't correct. Flow. We can't correct that. And the other issue is if we start again, we are not cleaning everything, so let's do that. So here, this is the part where we are cleaning everything, right here. So we need to do a couple of more things. So we need to set back the current char index to -1. We also want to set the current char to an empty array. And I think that's it for this part. So it should be working good there, but there's another thing that we need to do as here. So here we are going to check for the backspace key. So else if the key code equals 8, so that's the key code for backspace. So if that's true, let me just add a command here. So this is backspace. So if this is true, we're going to do some different things. So we are going to set the current char index. So the current char index is going to be the current char index, but instead of adding a number, because we're not going forward, we're going backwards. We are going to subtract 1, and also we are going to set the current char to an empty array. So every time we backspace, we're going to erase the current char, and it's like resetting, so we don't have that weird issue, and we go back in the index of the word, if that makes sense. And the other thing is that we are going to check for another thing here. So here else if, so this is going to take care of the once we hit the backspace, and if the word index equals the current word index. Well, no, this is for the case when we go beyond the word. So if we are hitting too much words, more words than the length of the word, more characters. So if the current char index is greater or equals the current word, which is words current word index depth length. So if this is true, and for this case we're also going to return danger background, because we're going beyond the word, so we also want to have some visual representation. So let's see if it works now. So if I hit start, so shining during, so I made a mistake and I can go back, so it's working. And if I start again, it should reset everything. If I go beyond, all of the word is marked, and yeah, so I can make a correction. Yeah, so finally this shouldn't be 10, you know, it should be 60. So that's the final thing. Yeah, now it's counting for 1 minute. So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the content, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. It really helps. These videos are a lot of work, so that helps to the channel. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.